I think the easy answer is that it's a startup. 90% of startups don't succeed. We only hear about the success stories like survivorship bias.
Working alongside people that really believed in what we valued and showed that culture is not something to put on a paper and a slide, but it's something that you have to live by.
Hello and welcome to Brazil is Not for Beginners. Today I have a special episode. I know I say that every episode, but today is truly special. I'm joined by my co-founders from Teddy, Daniel Pizarro and Eduardo Nuzzi. Thank you guys so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So guys, we have talked about this for a while, you guys coming on this podcast. I started this a little bit more than a year ago as a bit of an outlet so that I could be more focused at work. This was my place to explore and have fun and do more crazy conversations. And we always joked that it would be great to have you two on when we raised our seed round and we could talk a little bit about what it's like to work with a gringo. Unfortunately, our seed round did not come together. And so we've taken the difficult decision to wind down Teddy. And so I'm inviting you on now to talk about the experience of having a startup in Brazil. The name of the podcast is Brazil is Not for Beginners. We have been through, a wonderful experience together, 3.5 years between our group. And I'm just really excited to chat about this, do a little bit of a postmortem and put a little bit of a bow on this experience with you guys. So again, thanks so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for us to be here. I mean, we can still talk about how it's to work with a gringo. I think we have a good experience on that. But yeah, it has been an incredible journey and we're super happy to debrief and discuss and tell the world how the experience was.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot that we can talk about, both in terms of the things that we learned and also the things that we think that we could learn from, but we still haven't. So yeah, a lot to talk about.
Yeah, as we went through this process, that it's a process winding down, we spoke to a lot of our investors and our advisors. And one of the things they said was, write about it, that there's a lot of, for lack of a better word, success porn on the internet. Everybody seems to be a billionaire and knocking it out of the park, and nobody's talking about what it's really like to be an entrepreneur. And so since we have this vehicle, we'll instead do a conversation about it instead of writing about it. But the other thing that we got asked regularly, the big question was, so what did you learn? And so I'm really excited to get into that. We've obviously talked about it before, but not as publicly as this. But maybe before we get into Teddy and our journey there, it'd be great if the two of you could introduce yourselves. So maybe Daniel, if you want to start, just briefly tell us about yourselves. How do we know each other? Why did we decide to work together?
Sure, that would be my pleasure. So just to start, I think we did these introductions maybe 200 times when we speak to funds and partners. So we have been even more. So my background, so I'm an engineer. I'm a computer engineer, but I'm not the tech guy on the team. That's the role of it too. My role is more related to operations, insurance, and product. I know Isaac for more than 10 years now. We studied together in France. We did an MBA at INSEAD in 2013. My career has been mostly in banking and insurance. The last 6 or so years have been in insurance, including Teddy. It's a fascinating industry. I really like it, but with a lot of challenges. And we came across some of them during this journey at Teddy. So that's a little bit about myself. Happy to get into more details later on.
Hi, I'm Edu. I was the CTO at Teddy. So I've known Isaac and Daniel for, I think, 3 years, maybe 3.5 years. So I'm a software engineer, but more than 10 years ago, I studied music, both in Brazil and also in the United States. After a while, I realized that I did not want to follow the career in music. So I came back to Brazil. Somehow I ended up in a digital design major here in Brazil. And at the first semester, I had a programming course and I just was fascinated by it. So I started studying all that I could, got my first job as a developer. And since then, so it's been 10 years that I've been a developer. I was a co-founder and CTO at Swipe before Teddy in 2017. And we started out as a crypto payment gateway, similar to PayPal. So there's BitPay right now, and they were alive back then as well. So we were kind of like that. But soon we realized that at the time, people, especially in Brazil, they did not want to pay with crypto. They wanted to invest and hold. So really quickly, we realized that and we switched to another system, another model. And we started doing some consulting work for big companies related to blockchain and decentralized systems. And after a while, we switched again our business model, and we ended up becoming a banking as a service company. It was acquired by Conta Azul in 2021. So I left. And then in 2022, I met Isaac and Daniel in a CTO group, a bunch of very experienced CTOs. I saw a post there, and somehow, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but somehow something really clicked inside me. And yeah, so that's my background.
Excellent. So, Daniel, you came from a bit more of a traditional background, as you mentioned, working for big banks and big insurance companies. Edu, you'd already been a CTO at a startup, but Daniel, you and I started talking about this idea of founding something about 4 years ago. And, I can talk a little bit about my own desire to start something and why I wanted to build a startup. But what attracted both of you to the idea of doing a startup? And in particular, what attracted you to Teddy? But maybe we could start just with what attracted you. Why did you want to do a startup? And then we could talk a little bit more about Teddy.
Yeah, sure. I've been working in a traditional path for more than 10 years before Teddy. And I felt that although I was developing myself and building a career, I felt that something was missing. So I felt that maybe I could use some of the things I've learned and the connections I've made and the friends I've made to bring that together and build something valuable to the world. It's not that what I was doing before was not valuable, but I felt that I was part of a bigger kind of piece, a bigger machine. And I think by starting something on my own, I probably could focus on exactly what I felt was needed and necessary and kind of surround myself with great people and build a machine on my own to deliver what I felt was right. And I think I've been working in insurance for a couple of years before Teddy. And I saw the potential of the product. Insurance is really misunderstood. People don't like it. It's either bought by obligation or fear. As we know by now, nobody wakes up in the morning dreaming of buying insurance. They kind of dread of buying insurance. It's the least thing that they want to do in a day, but they sometimes are forced to do it. But at the same time, I felt that insurance was a great tool to protect people from unexpected risks, right? Especially in a country like Brazil, where we see ups and downs all the time. And especially now, we're seeing it again with governmental issues, with a lot of uncertainty, regulatory uncertainty, economical uncertainty, a lot of things happening. And I felt that insurance could play a role. And I always thought about it while working on the industry. And then when you came to Brazil, Isaac, and we started discussing, I felt I could unite that idea of using insurance as a force for good, as a tool to make things better for everyone using insurance, and also bringing on board and try to get amazing minds together behind solid cause. That was my motivation. And besides that, we always discuss, let's build a company that we want to work for. So let's think about everything that we dislike about our regular jobs, and let's transform it and build an environment where we wake up in the morning and be proud and happy to work for that movement or that company. So those were my main personal motivations and my main motivations to become an entrepreneur.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of that resonated with me. And obviously, when we started this and started working together, we talked a lot about what we wanted from the company. And again, we'll get into that in a second, what we were trying to do with it, but also why we were trying to do it and what we wanted to build in addition. For me, coming from professional services, I was a partner at a consulting firm, and there's only so many hours people can work. And so I wanted to build a machine, and also the positive social impact was a big piece, solving a big problem, working with smart people, all of that. But Edu, I'm curious, Daniel and I knew each other. We had talked before about this, spent a lot of time thinking about it. We were together for maybe 8 months working on the idea, actually talking to investors. People said, let me know when you get a CTO and we'll write you a check. And we had a friend send a message in a CTO group with a job description and a little bit of a blurb about what we were trying to do with Teddy. And we somehow roped you in. So you had been through a startup experience. What made you want to build another startup?
Yeah, I think that's nice to go back and remember those times, because I had just left Swipe at that time. So I think it was like 8 months that I had left. And I was doing some freelance work. I was doing some small gigs as a developer because I was a little tired of the pressure and the speed required and the energy that you have to put into building a startup from 0 to 1. So I was very tired, to be honest. And I was definitely not thinking of going back again and starting something from scratch, especially like at that time. So when I saw the post, I can't explain rationally, to be honest, but I remember that something clicked. I saw the post. It was like a PDF file, very like regular job description. But I was like, okay, let me talk to these guys. And I remember the first lunch that we had. And when I saw you, like, of course, like as Daniel and you, Isaac, said before, the impact part was a very big motivation for me as well. And also when I heard about the idea, and we were just getting from the COVID times. So at that time, it was very clear to everyone, I think, that the people that were at the front line, they really, really worked hard and they did not get support. Like most of them, not at all. So when I heard of the opportunity to try to solve that problem, which was a very big problem, and it was very impact oriented. So I think those were the two main points. And also there's a third point to that for me, because when we started talking, I could see that you really cared about that problem, both of you. At the time, I felt like that. And also when I started to imagine like me being part of that project, when I did that exercise, like when I put myself into the puzzle, I could see the whole picture a little bit clearer. So that for me felt like a good sign, you know? So if I could like started imagining myself into the project, and I could like, okay, this does not make sense. I don't know how I can contribute. But I saw that Isaac and Daniel had a very solid background. And also like I was a co-founder at a previous startup. But thinking right now that the experience was very different. And I think we're going to go into that a little later. But yeah, big problem, impact. And also I really felt a connection with both of you. And I felt that we had complementary skills.
Awesome. I can say until this day, Daniel and I will tell other people that maybe the best thing we did was bringing Edu on as our third co-founder.
We should write a book about how to hire CTOs for early stage startups, because that's one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah, I would argue that maybe we got lucky more than that we had a plan, but it was great to have you. So we've talked a little around it, and I've never mentioned it explicitly on this podcast, but do one of you want to take a turn at trying to explain a little bit about what Teddy was, what we were trying to do, what the problem was, and how we were trying to do it? I know that I usually did the pitching, and maybe that's why we didn't raise the money. But Daniel, if you want to take a turn, it'd be great to share with everybody what we were trying to do.
No, sure. The whole idea of Teddy came from a big trend that we're observing here in Brazil, but all over the world. So we're seeing a shift from formal, standard type of work to a more independent, more project-based and freelance type of work. So people are moving from working 20 years for a company and having all kinds of benefits and protections towards a life where they have multiple projects, they work as freelancers. And Edu is a good example of that. And most developers and designers and Uber drivers, a lot of people from a big, broad spectrum from the society, from street sellers to doctors and lawyers. So we're seeing a big shift from traditional employment towards an independent type of work. And here in Brazil, that has always been the case. I mean, informal work has always been very prevalent here in Brazil. People always work like that. And in most of the developing world, people work like that. But now with the advent of technology and in kind of flexible labor regulation and so on, we're seeing an even faster and bigger shift towards this type of work. In Brazil, we're talking about half of the working population right now working as independent workers. And one thing I realized coming from insurance, and Isaac as well, from his background in the US and also working as a consultant, we realized that people that work independently, they have potentially a better salary, they have a great life, good flexibility, they can work whenever they want, but they are more exposed to risk. So they only earn money when they actually work. Think of an Uber driver. If he doesn't drive, or if he's sick, or if his car is broke and he is unable to go out, he won't make any salary. And our idea, and Teddy kind of emerged from that idea. How do we protect the income of independent workers? So how do we make sure that for some reason they are unable to work, their daily fee or their income is not impacted by this situation? That's our big thesis and our big dream, is to protect the income of people that do not have other protections and are not part of a traditional corporation.
I remember at the time when I first heard the idea that you both mentioned, and that made a lot of sense, and it still makes a lot of sense to me, is that in order to protect the income of those people, most companies, they try to give more credit to the workers. So sometimes that work, but especially like in this context where, as Daniel said, like if the Uber driver cannot work for a couple of days, he may get into a lot of debt. And that could be like a snowball for years to come. So we were trying to build something different, like a quite different approach. Instead of just giving credit to those workers, we were trying to protect the income using insurance, which is like a predictive approach. But also there were a lot of challenges using that approach, especially in Brazil because of the culture and all of that. But I remember that really called me as well, because this was a very conscious approach, I think.
Yeah, I think Daniel and I did a lot of thinking beforehand, right? So we came up with the idea. We had a few other ideas beforehand, and we talked a lot about this. We talked about small business insurance was one that we really liked. And when we started thinking about independent workers and the shift, part of it was when I came to Brazil and didn't have health insurance and I needed to open up a PJ to get health insurance, right? And your wife makes money kind of lumpy, right? So she said, wouldn't it be great if somebody could just pay me an even salary and I could make a standard salary every month independent of, sometimes I'm going to make a bunch and sometimes I'm not going to have as many jobs. And we looked at credit a lot and we found that the companies that were doing credit, especially in Latin America, weren't doing well. It's really easy to give money away. It's hard to collect it. I think that there was a mission behind insurance, right? It's a base product that provides security, right? Daniel, you always used to say when I was single, I wouldn't try to pick up a girl in a bar saying that I worked in insurance, but it's a good product. It's really important and it allows people to take risk, right? I think that's the whole thing. And it's also cash flow positive, which from a business perspective, we talked about is we get the money beforehand. And so there were a lot of things that we liked about it, but obviously we knew the challenges and knew that there were companies in other markets that were also trying this. Eventually we saw that one or two in Brazil also, but what do you think didn't work? It's one of these things that sounds logical, right? People should have income protection. Yeah. People should have protection. And I obviously want to talk about some of the things that we did right and some of the things that were in our favor, but what do you think prevented us from succeeding? So we're in the process of winding down. We've been at this for 3.5 years. What happened?
Well, I think the easy answer is that it's a startup. 90% of startups don't succeed. We only hear about the success stories like survivorship bias. For sure. I think in our case, as you said, we did a lot of right things. I think a couple of things we could have done better, for sure. But if I think personally about what went wrong, I think in the end, starting a company from scratch, from a blank page, I like to say that at Teddy or at any startup, it's a world where in the morning you're buying toilet paper for the office, and in the afternoon you're talking to venture capital funds in Singapore pitching ideas. So it's a very extreme worlds that we live in, and starting from scratch is not easy. So it's super hard. And in the end, it's a matter of having enough air to try enough things, to fail at enough things, to try again, and eventually find a way out. So I like to say it's like running in the dark, right? So you hit a wall, you have to decide quickly left or right, and then you hit another wall, left or right, and then eventually you find a way out. And I think we didn't have enough air to keep pumping into walls. And that's the main reason why we're not continuing. So we run out of cash. That's the easy answer. And why? I think it's probably we didn't have enough traction right now with the pre-seed money that we raised to justify another round, right? And I think there are internal reasons for that. I think as a team, we decided to focus a lot on the product and on the technology and not too much on the commercial aspect of it. So we didn't try to sell to have traction that we needed to raise. We tried to work with the insurance partners, with the development team to build a solid product that would allow us to have a initial proof that things are going to the right direction, and then eventually raise another round to scale and get the traction that we actually needed. And I think if we think about a market that we're facing right now with low liquidity, with funds not investing too much, not even being able to raise their own funds to continue investing, maybe that was not the right strategy. We should have maybe tried to gain more traction more aggressively early on. But in the end, those are all conjectures that we don't control, right? I think we took the best decision based on what we know, and we could have done things differently. But I think it's a normal outcome. It's an expected outcome in the end.
Yeah.
I think that's my reaction to what happened.
Yeah, I would say that in the time that we had, we were not able to find product market fit or just get a glimpse like close to that. I think we built a very good product. We had paying customers and we had like no churn. So the customers like product, but also we found out that the product that we had, first of all, it was hard to rely on a lot of slow partners because we were on a highly regulated market and we relied on very slow partners. And sometimes they were not slow, but they were like very messy in their operations. So that's a little part that I would say. That's not the main reason, but I think it's a combination of a lot of factors. So being in a highly regulated market made us a little slower in terms of validating and iterating. And so the time that we had was not enough to find a product that was very, very high priority for the companies. So once we talked to the companies, we would see that they really liked the product. Like you could see Isaac always said that he was like leading the commercial part. So he would say, I could see like the eyes, they were like very, very interested. But then they like did not come back. So we eventually found out that we probably had a product that was important, very important to the company, but not a high priority at the time. So I think we could probably find a way out if we had more time. Probably not sure because we still hadn't validated all our main hypotheses. But I would also add those things to what Daniel said.
Yeah, I think if I can add a couple of things, and I agree with everything that you guys both said, there's I forget who says it. I think it might be something with YC that, the product market fit question is really, what would you do if you didn't have our product? And so we're seeing that now because we're winding down and we're telling our clients, well, you don't have our product anymore. And a number of them, I'd say half of them are worried. Like, what are we going to do now? Which is supposed to be the product market fit question. So to some degree, we had it. And so the question is, was the market smaller than we thought it was? Or did we not have enough time? I think, we were approaching this from a B2B perspective. We weren't selling it to individual independent workers. We were trying to sell it to platforms. And B2B sales take a long time. This was a situation where even for us to run a pilot, we were talking to some pretty big companies about potential pilots. You need 6-8 months to run a pilot, to see results, to then for them to decide. And like Daniel said, at the end of the day, we ran out of cash. 5 years ago, would we have done enough with the traction we had to have raised a round to keep going? Maybe in this market, it was different. It's very frustrating because there's not one thing that we can point to either that we can say we did that wrong, right? I think that's part of the fun and the frustration of being a founder is, like Daniel said, you make the best decision you can with the information you have, and it's always incomplete. And so I can't look back and say, well, if we had a commercial person selling along with me, we would have succeeded. Maybe not. If we'd have done more product, if we'd have focused on this client instead of that client, we had a nice pipeline and we were having great conversations. I've had some of those people actually reach back out to me since we decided to wind down and say, sorry for not following up. We still are interested. But it's one of the things that I think I realized, and Edu, you touched on it, was this is important, right? So the problem we were solving for the companies to try to get this in there was retention, productivity. We were trying to help these platforms retain workers and drive productivity there. And that's a problem. And that's a real problem for these platforms, with nurses, with home care, with all the different areas that we were focusing on. But it's also one of these things where it is a problem they know how to deal with. So if you said, is retention a problem? Yes. But I'll just find somebody new, right? And so there's an element of it's the devil So I know that I have a 15% churn. And yeah, it would be great to fix that, but I'm going to have to spend money on your solution. And then I don't know if it's going to work. Whereas I just know that it's 15% churn and I can deal with it. Our competition wasn't the other insurance companies. It wasn't the other startups doing this. It was just the inertia of companies saying, I've got a fire to put out and my margins are tight because of the economy and I can't focus on this right now. And I think another thing is that you have to be rational about this whole thing. And I know that there's a certain level of irrationality about starting a venture-backed business in the first place. I mean, the idea that the three of us are going to come together and build a billion-dollar business by disrupting a multi-billion-dollar industry is inherently irrational. But I think what I mean to say is you need to set goals and milestones and see how you're progressing against them. I think one of our investors said it really well, that when you're at this stage, 0 to 1 and even like 1 to 10, you're a experiment factory, right? You're running a bunch of experiments, testing them and seeing how the results come back. And the results are going to come back and they're going to be partial and they're going to be messy. And then you need to make a decision about whether to continue or to stop. And when you're in the journey, you're dealing with lots of things. You're not just running that one experiment, you're running dozens at the same time and dealing with a business and people and all the things that come with that. And it's easy to just rationalize pushing forward, right? Because if we just close this client, or if we just improve the scale, or if we just do this, but that client's been saying for 6 months that they're 2 months away from building their user base, or that potential client in the sales pipeline's been kind of giving you the runaround, or they haven't been responding, or it's not evolving the way that you want it to. And you need to step back and see the forest for the trees and see how things are evolving. And that's really important. I know, in the ecosystem here, we're pretty well integrated with Latitude and other things like that. And, there's been people that were seemingly on positive paths that raised a lot of money and were moving forward and decided to stop because they realized that what they were building wasn't a venture-backed business or wasn't scalable to the extent that they thought it was going to be. And that always really stuck with me, is this idea of Are you on the path to building a venture-backed business, and what are the implications of building a venture-backed business? Insurance is a huge opportunity, as we've said, but it's really, really hard. And there's a lot of other startups working on similar problems, and no one has quite cracked it yet.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think in the end, insurance is not a hot industry. It's not a sexy industry for funding purposes, right? Maybe we should have changed our name to Teddy AI or something like that. That probably would have
Crypto AI.
allowed us to fundraise. Crypto Teddy, yeah, something like that. But yeah, it's hard to kind of pinpoint one reason on why we fail. I think in the end, it's not enough time to try different things.
Yeah, and also, as you said, the fundraising market changes very, very fast. So you can probably say better than me, Isaac and Daniel. But I remember that when we first started doing the angel round, like at first, the market was like A. A couple of months later, the market was like Z. It was going to a different direction. It was getting harder to fundraise. The data that we needed and also the proof that we needed also changed a lot. And the expectations for a seed round company changed as well. So I would say that that variable was quite high in terms of how it impacted our decisions and our end as well.
I think that's totally right. And when we did our pre-seed round, there were a number of people who were going to give us bigger checks than they were ended up giving us because the economy fell apart. I think we only lost one investor who said that they wanted to invest and then wasn't able to because they lost their job. So we said, no worries, we understand completely. But we definitely had a bit of a smaller round than we'd anticipated. Not tremendously, but 20% smaller, something like that. And it's continued since, right? Just fundraising is very hard. And I think that there's also a little bit of a bias towards people that weren't able to fundraise during this period, that we just tried to run a very tight ship and keep it really conservative in our cash burn. But I've heard from other people as well that raised around when we raised that it just was very hard to get another round through the door because of bias against people that raised in that early 2022 period. But I'll tell you, I was in New York recently and ran into a couple of people that we were trying to get to invest. And they said, I really tried to get the team on board, but insurance, like you said, is not hot at the moment. And there's factors that are outside of your control with a lot of this. And you learn to accept that. But on a positive note, what are some of the things other obviously than hiring Edu, Daniel, that you think we did right?
So I think we improved a lot along the way. I feel that initially you coming from consultancy and myself coming from a traditional kind of multinational company, we were strategizing a lot and thinking a lot and building slides and taking a bit long to make decisions. And I think we improved dramatically on how to make decisions and how to move faster along the way. We kind of leveraged a lot of things to do, a lot of no-code tools, a lot of straight processes that we could shortcut the duration or the time that we needed to reach certain milestones. And by doing that, of course, testing quicker and failing quicker and reiterating quicker. And I think we did that right. I think our company was way more efficient than at the beginning. I think hiring was one of our greatest achievements. Not only Edu, I think the rest of the team was fantastic. I want to give shout outs to our head of insurance. I come from insurance, but I've always been not inside the product, like talking to regulators and writing product descriptions. That is a highly technical type of work. And we hired someone that was doing that for her previous work. And she has been fantastic and helping us not only on that, on many other things. That was great. And the dev team, I think we had dispersed team across Brazil. Brazil's a continent. We had people living 4 hours flight from Sao Paulo, and we worked really well as a team. We had no turnover during these 3 years. I think the team kept together. We struggled a bit with building a culture and trying to enforce certain values within the team. But I think in the end, the proximity that we had as a core group of people building Teddy was really solid. And then the culture came naturally among the team and the people working here. I think that was also a solid thing that we did. And I'm really proud of what we built in terms of human capital. Let's put it like that.
For me, I would say, first, personally, I think coming from another startup that started out as a crypto payment gateway and then did blockchain consulting and then banking as a service, you can imagine that my mind was very pointed to doing like complex solutions to problems. So I think at first we were trying to build something that was like perfect and also trying to do something that was way more complex than it needed to be. So I think we learned a lot about that. And also like at the middle to the end, We started using more no-code tools. Also, it started to experiment with automations, like simpler automations. We didn't have to build a whole suite software to test things. And we realized that's like an obvious thing to think about. But once you were in the field, as Teddy Roosevelt said, it's easy to get lost. You have to take decisions very quickly. You have to deal with a lot of different departments. So it's easy to get lost into the rationale of the decisions that we did. And also, going to the second point that I would say that links to the first one is that we all had different backgrounds. And that's a good thing. But also at first, we had some small challenges in terms of working styles. Like one came from consulting, one came from the startup scene, and one came from the corporate field. So I remember that at first, our discussions were very long. The communication was a little hard. And I remember that later on, things got way better. We never had like a very hard discussion in terms of losing respect. So it was very, very nice to see us evolving in terms of getting better communication and also having more speed in terms of the number of words that we needed in order to align ourselves. I think we got a lot better about that as well.
Yeah, I think our pace was accelerating. We were getting better at communicating, at iterating, at developing, and all of those different things, which is a shame because we have to stop now. But we were definitely getting better. I also think we had some cool innovations, right? So in working with independent workers, there's a whole issue of whether the platform has a legal obligation, and we were able to solve that in some ways with our partners. And the other thing, you both talked a little bit about the team, which I think also was a thing that I'm really proud of, but our broader team, right? Our advisors and the investors that we brought in. And I think even this process, Edu, you mentioned it, we've called all of our investors individually, ones we could get on the phone at least, but that we've been in touch with. And everybody's been really great. And I'm going to ask in a second what we learned. And I think one of the things that I've learned going through this ending process is it reiterated how good the support network we built was and how much we could have actually asked for help more. People are more than happy to help. I think, again, part of the reasons we're doing this is because a lot of our investors and advisors told us to write about it and talk about this process and the experience and everything like that. But people were really engaged and really wanted to know how they could help and what they could do. And we built a really great network. It's too many people to name here, both people that were officially on our cap table, I would say, versus people that were more informal that were helping. But this ecosystem was really great. We did a good job of finding that, we participated in Latitude, and that was a really great experience. The guys at Gilgamesh, obviously, I think they deserve an individual shout out, but I think I can speak for all three of us when I say that we're just really grateful that you guys invested in us and believed in us and continue to support us. And if there's any outcome from this, I want to make sure that those guys know that we really value this. And one of the questions they asked repeatedly, and I think is really important here, and you talked a little bit about it actually a second ago, Edu, is what did we learn? And I know that one of the things that I learned, and it's allowing us to have this conversation now publicly that we're going to put out about our failure. Edu, you always really pushed for having hard conversations and not sweeping things under the rug and talking openly, especially among the three of us. And I really valued that. And that was something, and not that I ever avoided that type of stuff, but you really pushed for it. And that open atmosphere is really important. But I'm curious, there's a lot of different ways that we can talk about. What did you learn? What did you learn about 0 to 1? What did you learn about working in a regulated market? What did you learn about sales? Just curious, kind of what are some of the learnings that you took away from this experience? I don't know, Daniel, if you want to start first.
Yeah, of course. I think the biggest learning I got, and I'm sure you guys would agree with me, is that being an entrepreneur is hard, super hard. And now whenever I go out and I see a small shop and people trying to do things, I have an immense respect to anyone, even if the service is not great or if something is not 100% working. I have immense respect to anyone who tries to dare to be in the arena. Like one of the reasons why we're called Teddy is due to Teddy Roosevelt, the Men in Arena speech. And I think I learned that by starting something on my own, realize how difficult it is. And I super value anyone who does that. Besides that, I think building on what you said, finding the right investors, right partners, right clients even, and doing everything by yourself, it makes it even more difficult. But if you build a nice support network and you can learn from the people you are interacting with, I think with time, things start to be better and easier. And those are my key learnings. I think it's surround yourself with great people on all levels and understand that what you're trying to do is not an easy thing. But on top of that, we had great careers before, the three of us, and I think the entire team. And sometimes people are afraid of starting something, even if they have a great idea or dream to do something. They don't start because they're afraid that the experience might impact their careers. And in my view, I think getting out of it right now, I'm not sure exactly to where. I think the 3 years that we spent together not only helped me become a better person, but I'm sure the skills and the relationships that I've built during the Teddy journey will make me a better professional. And I'll be able to build up on this and be a better contributor and a better person overall by enduring the pain that we did during this journey. I think those are my learnings.
For me, I think that in terms of the tech learnings, as I mentioned before, thinking and realizing that tech is a mean to an end and not an end by itself. That's something that some people would argue against, I think. But I think that's something that was very clear to me, as I said, because we were trying to solve a problem, not trying to build something cool, technically complex, and try to impress people with how intelligent we were. We were really, really into the problem. And I would say that working with both of you and also like the whole team, to be honest, not only the Teddy official team, but the full network of people that trusted us and invested in us and gave support when we needed. As Isaac said, we had a very, very good network support. So working alongside people that really believed in what we valued and showed that culture is not something to put on a paper and a slide, but it's something that you have to live by. So if we're talking about impact, that's probably not the official etymology, but if we're talking about impact, I always say that impact is like a pact. It has to start with a pact that we do from the inside, impact. So there were a couple of times that we could have given away some of our principles and we did not. And that's something that really showed me that it's possible to live by those principles, So I hear a lot of people saying that to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to be a bad person sometimes. And like the network of people that relied on us and also like the team that we built showed me that's not true. You can be a good person and also have success and also have a good impact in the world. So of course, like here we're talking that we were winding down Teddy, but the people that invested in us a lot of times showed us that those beliefs are not true. So when we started talking to the investors, as Isaac said, most of the calls, the people would be very empathetic and they were like, oh, let me know how I can help. Of course, like that's not the path that we wanted. Definitely. We really wanted to succeed, but seeing a lot of good examples of how you can be a good person, be empathetic, live by your principles, those things showed up a lot of times during this journey. And I'm really glad to have gone through with you guys.
Yeah, that's great. I'm really glad that you tried to give the etymology of a word. I know you love to do that, more so in Portuguese. Edu is also a poet in addition to being a programmer and a musician. And I really love that you look for the meaning in the specific words that we use. And that was really great. I think a couple of things for me that stood out. As I get older, I find that cliches have more truth than ever before. They became cliches for a reason. But, one of the things that I really took away, and again, I think it comes back to what we got better at is a bias towards action. I think at the beginning, and Edu, you talked about it, me coming from consulting and Daniel and Bia from the big insurance companies, you from startup and the tech team, we sought consensus a lot. And there's a lot of things you don't necessarily need consensus on to move forward. I think there's a lot of learnings and failures. Done is better than perfect, especially in the startup. I mean, obviously there's situations when you need to be perfect if you're dealing with somebody's health or somebody's safety, be paid a claim. We were perfect in dealing with that. But there's things where it's better to take a decision, whether it's the right or the wrong decision, you'll learn quickly from whether it worked out. And I think we got better at that. But bias towards action is a big thing. Don't seek consensus. Define where you might want consensus and where you don't necessarily need it. Those were big things. I know I was doing a little bit more of the commercial side, but B2B sales is hard. I think everybody says that, right? One of the things we go back on is, should we have had a commercial person or should we be doing it ourselves? And there's debates about founder-led sales versus somebody else selling it. One way or the other, whether it's the sales or support or customer success or anything else, I just think the more you can talk to clients is another thing. You learn so much from those conversations. Whether you're right or wrong in reading them, you'll find out later, right? So maybe people weren't as excited as I thought they were. Or maybe they were, but they weren't as motivated to buy, right? I mean, there's a big difference between somebody saying they want something and somebody parting with money for it. And so all of these cliches that I think you hear and read about and that become posters are that for a reason. And people should seek for lack of a better word, the etymology of it, coming back to what Edu said. So for me, those were big learnings on my end. I talked a little bit about what did we do right, but were there any decisions that you think back on that were really pivotal to our journey? Do you talked now about, we could have pivoted at different points. We definitely tweaked what we did, right? So we started with just insurance and we moved into benefits and rewards a little bit, and took us a little bit of time as well to kind of position that. But one of the things that stood out to me, I always remember one of our advisors talked a little bit about the difference between an entrepreneur and a social entrepreneur. Is an entrepreneur is trying to build a business, and a social entrepreneur is trying to solve a problem by building a business. And we, I think, leaned more towards solving the problem. But where were some of those pivotal moments, and what are some of the things that you're both proud of from having been through this?
I think, Isaac and I, when we started, I think our idea was to sell B2C, to sell directly to workers, because in the end, those are the guys that actually need the protections. And eventually, or quickly, we realized that selling B2C with the budget we had as a starting company, it's not easy. So we quickly pivot to B2B, convincing companies that offering protections to their workers was a good thing for them, because that would suggest the workers to remain loyal to the company and to be more productive and so on. I think that was a clear pivotal decision. And I think that was the right decision.
D2C is hard.
I'm not judging. And because we moved to B2B, we didn't invest too much on building a brand and being kind of visible on social media and all those other things associated with a B2C operation. I think that was a key moment that we kind of changed directions and shaped our future in Teddy.
I think there were a lot of things that actually helped us during the way. And as I said before, the way that we all dealt with the hard situations and the hard conversations. So we were always very open to having hard conversations. I think that's something that I'm proud of. Also, building a support network, I think that's very, very important. I think that we were able, especially you, Daniel, and you, Isaac, both were very good at building a good support network of very experienced people, and also people that were not only trying to get a good return on their investments. Of course, like everyone wanted that, but not only that, they also wanted to help and be of support. So I think that's something that I'm proud of. Also, having the team very close, even as Daniel said, we were like half remote team spread out across the country, a very big country. And we were able to stay close to each other and also talk a lot. So every time that we had different opinions, and even when we came to a situation where the conversation was a little hard, every time we were able to discuss it out, just talk again, and everything went fine. So we were able to balance that. And also we had a very good balance of very good industry experience and also people that were just starting out in the insurance industry. And I think that was a good balance. And I think we ended up learning how to manage that difference, because once you were in any kind of field so much, you have some bias. That's undeniable. But also you know a lot what does work and what does not work. At the other extreme part, you obviously don't know anything about the market and you're probably going to hit against the wall more times. But sometimes it happens that since you are not into the industry, you can come up with some very creative idea, and that can also avoid some problems that it can buy us time. So I think that balance went very, very good eventually. I think in the first couple months, we were trying to understand what was going on, but eventually we managed to balance that. And that, I think, was a good point on our side as well.
Yeah, I think, we had that as one of our values, right? I think it was the beginner's mindset and the idea of walking through walls, that if you don't know there's a wall, you can walk through it. And it was always a part of discussion of Daniel and Bia coming from insurance, knowing what works and what doesn't work. And I think me and you and the tech team saying, well, can't we try this or can't we do that? And I think that's one of the things that why insurance was so sexy and why it's not sexy anymore, was you had a ton of people coming into insurance saying, we're going to revolutionize insurance. But insurance is thousands of years old and works a certain way for certain reasons. And I've learned, like Daniel mentioned, the cliches, nobody wakes up in the morning wanting to buy insurance. Insurance is a push product, not a pull product. I can say them right now. But it's one of these areas that, there's not that many really successful insurtechs. And it's really surprising because it seems like a space that should be so ripe for disruption. And it's hard at the same time because there's fundamental things. I don't know, Daniel, if you want to add anything about this. I'm just kind of blabbering at this point.
No, that has been the question all the time. Even inside insurance companies, I've been to countless of strategy sessions thinking about what can disrupt us and what should we do? Are we going to be attacked by those digital banks and so on? I think in the end, insurance is about trust. And you have 100-years-old companies that have that trust, that enact trust, that as a startup, it's hard for you to convey that trust at the beginning, right? I mean, you're just starting out. Why should someone give you money with the promise that in 10 years you would pay them if something happens? Who knows if you are going to be there in 10 years? I think there is this aspect. And I also believe that insurance is a business of building a base, right? So you start small and you grow the base and you have more people covered and your risk selection improves, your underwriting process improves, you start learning, and soon you have like a snowball, a big company with lots of people protected. And then you become more solid and more kind of resilient as a company. And if you're starting out, probably you're getting the risk that the big companies didn't want. So we're looking at independent workers. Most of them, they are not protected for a couple of reasons. One of them is because the big companies are not looking at that. They do not have access to the products we were selling. So they come to us. But maybe they're not great risks. In the end, we need to make money. So we need to have a balance of how much we collect and how much we're going to give them. So there are a lot of things that make it difficult for innovation or disruption to happen in the insurance world. Another thing is that different from other industries, there is not a love relationship. No one loves their insurance company. So there is not many touch points. You usually buy insurance and you forget you have it. And if all goes well, you don't even talk to the company, right? So it's a strange relationship that do not have a lot of touch points between the company and the buyer of protection. So a lot of things in conjunction make the insurance industry very hard to be disrupted as it is right now, besides regulation, besides all the other natural protections that they have. But I mean, if it were easy, we probably wouldn't have started, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying that, but it's $1 trillion industry. It's an amazing opportunity. If someone cracks it, it's not $1 billion, it's $1 trillion opportunity. And I think people should keep trying, but it's not going to be easy, especially in Brazil, as Brazil is not for beginners, as you know.
Yeah, we're going to get to that one in a second. We originally wanted to do this podcast to ask what it was like to work with a gringo. So, Daniel, you've done this before, but I don't know. What was it like to work with a gringo?
Well, I think I'm going to give the question back because, to be honest, you, Isaac, you know more about Brazil than most Brazilians. So I think you don't really count in that scenario. But
I have my American habits for sure.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But I think people in Brazil, we have a lot of habits that can be a little weird for some people outside. But working with a foreigner, especially about like your person, Isaac, I think the whole idea of protecting independent workers from the beginning, it was very clear that the goal was very related to impact. So Teddy, the company name came from the North American culture. So I think we are all very open to that. And I think that's something that's probably common in Brazil because we do not value so much our own culture. So that's the bad part of it. But the good side of that is that we are flexible to deal with differences. We're very flexible to deal with valuing good things about other countries, but we're not very good at valuing good things about our own. Yeah, so working with a foreigner showed me that it's a nice thing, to value the good things that you have like in your own country. Not like overvalue it and like put it over other countries and other cultures, but it's a good thing, It's important, I think, to value where we came from.
Yeah, if you allow me to be more specific, maybe, I think working with Isaac, and I think more than the American side, but also the consulting side, you are always very organized with very clear talking points and discussion points and having a lot of preparation to every meeting. That was great. Also, the follow-up after every meeting, I think we don't do that here in Brazil a lot, but I think it's an American thing. You always thanked everyone after the meeting, which I think it's great because it keeps the relationship and connection going. And I also feel that Brazil and a lot of Latin countries, we tend to be very relationship driven, right? I mean, things are left open all the time, kind of between the lines. And I know you understand that and you enjoy it as well. You're very relationship driven, but I think you tend to push people towards a conclusion and a decision point. I think that's great as well. And I think we need to learn here in Brazil how to be more direct maybe and roll towards the conclusion and not beat around the bush and don't go anywhere. And I think you brought that to the team. And I think that was great.
Yeah, agreed. It's the sales part, right? Get a next step when you're on the phone. Don't leave it open. I'm going to send you an email or we're going to have a call next week. If they say no or let me think about it, then it's a no. So one of the things that came up on this podcast before, and Somebody actually sent a message around earlier today in a WhatsApp group I'm part of. Brazilians, they won't say no. They'll say, maybe let me think about it. So yes is a maybe and maybe is a no. At least get to a maybe, because then you know that it's a no. So that's one of the things. But I've got my wrap-up questions. We'll head to them in a second. I know we're going long on time here. I don't know if there's anything else that either of you want to share about this journey. I can say it's genuinely been a pleasure working with you guys, our investors, our advisors, our clients. I want to thank everybody that participated in this journey. This was a really, really fantastic 3.5 years of my life. I have 2 kids now, live in a new country. I'm a little bit poorer than I was when I started it, but, richer in other ways. And, no regrets. And, Daniel, you mentioned before this idea of people want to give it up or take the chance. And if I can say anything, if you have the conditions, I highly recommend everybody to try this. You learn so much about so many different things. I think it's really hard to even capture it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think in the end, what you want to avoid in the future is to have regrets, right? I mean, you don't want to be retired at 70 years old and keep thinking, oh, I should have started a company when I was younger, or I should have done that and this. And I think if you have a passion, you have a good idea, a dream, just go for it. I think it's an amazing experience in all kinds of dimensions. And even if it fails, it will be amazing. So it's a win-win situation. Of course, you need to ensure that you're covered somehow. I mean, having a good education, having a prior career, those are all types of insurance that allow people to make the decision to start a company and probably earn a little bit less for a couple of years to follow a dream. I don't want to discourage anyone. I think we haven't succeeded as a profit-making company, but as a team and as individuals, we have succeeded a lot. That's the message I want to leave to people.
I want to take this space to also thank everyone that supported us, that believed in us, that invested in us. Again, we had a very, very amazing team internally in terms of the day-to-day operation. Also, the people that were supporting us, like our own families and all of those people. I'm very glad that we did this. And also, as Daniel said, I think we managed to contribute to a system where sometimes I say that we all should try, in my opinion, we all should try to build and be a part and construct the ecosystem and not the ecosystem, And I think we did that. We showed that it's possible to work through a system that people contribute and they truly want to help each other. It's very hard to be an entrepreneur, especially in Brazil. I don't know about other countries, but I also believe that it should be hard as well. But I can say that it's very hard here in Brazil, as Brazil is not for beginners. Like, there are a lot of government stuff that impact our work, both positively and also negatively. But we are all globally living in a situation where the governments go like from one extreme to the other very quickly. And so it becomes a lot harder in those terms as well. And so the feeling of being part of this goal of building an ecosystem that support, not an ecosystem, it's very, very nice. So I do want to thank everyone, because I think that's something that we can say definitely that we showed and we lived that, And I want to thank you both as well for that.
Yeah, likewise. Edu, you got my next question there, but coming to the end here, what does the expression Brazil is not for beginners mean to the two of you?
I think the main meaning for me is that Brazil is unpredictable. I mean, you never know what's going to happen in a couple of months in terms of the market, the government, the laws, the partners, and so on. So you need to be over-prepared and maybe allow for serendipity to happen and quickly make decisions and change routes, because things are going to change. That's the only certainty in Brazil. So I think you need to be more flexible as an entrepreneur to drive a company here, because all your models and expectations and assumptions, I'm sure they're going to change as you move on.
Yeah, I think I said a little bit about that. I don't want to repeat myself. So I would say that we here in Brazil, we are very warm people. We like to hug. We like to kiss in the face when we meet someone. But also, we are very creative. And that's a good thing, and also has its own challenges, because our own financial system and also insurtech system, the way that things work, they're very complex here. And they're very complex because we are very creative. We can always find ways to fraud the system. And we have this expression that I know that it has come up during the podcast, like jeitinho brasileiro, but also makes us think a lot about how we can improve ourselves, And that's something that I think if you're coming to Brazil, I would say be prepared to always challenge yourself and be challenged in all kinds of ways. That's something that I would also add.
Awesome. I always like to end the podcast asking about if there's a Brazilian expression or a Brazilian habit that you guys really like that stands out. So not sure if you guys have given it any thought, but is there something that comes to mind that's typically Brazilian?
Yes, Brazil is full of expressions, right? I was thinking one related to our journey here, something that not exemplifies, but is connected to the experience we had at Teddy and being entrepreneurs. And one that came to mind was, se você está no inferno, abraça o capeta. Meaning that if you're in hell, hug the devil, which is great because it means that if there is a chaotic environment around you, if the situation is messy, you don't know what to do, just embrace it, kind of put a smile on your face and go ahead. So that's a very Brazilian situation. We're facing now a turmoil in terms of political and economical stuff, and people are just happy and kind of embracing the chaos and just moving ahead. That's Brazil.
Yes.
Yeah, I really like that. And also, I would say that if we would build like a picture of that phrase here in Brazil, like the devil would have like many, many, many faces and also many, many names.
Yes.
Like if you go like to Bahia, you can go to a church and say like Jesus and also go like to African goddesses and gods. You know, like I really like that part because we are very eclectic and we have an innate skill to embrace many different thoughts and some philosophies and some ways of living. So I really like that phrase. I would not add anything to that because I think that's a good representation.
Leaving it with Daniel. I like it. Awesome. Guys, how can people reach you if they want to learn more about Teddy or hire you because you're looking for work or just say hi and grab a beer when they come to Brazil?
So I think the easiest way is if you know Isaac, just send him a message, he will connect us. But otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on the other social networks. I don't post too much. It's more private, but I'm also available and happy to talk and also help anyone that wants to start something in Brazil or to even just visit.
Daniel has great restaurant recommendations. I will leave it at that.
I'm on Instagram as Edu Nuzzi, EDUNUZZI. Also LinkedIn. I do not post a lot, but I'm there. I'm following things and also connecting with people. Right now, I've been focusing on the last couple of months on other kinds of projects. So my life has always been full of very big changes. So I started out as a musician and then I studied design, ended up becoming a developer. And now I'm involved in a healing center that teaches like humanism and healing consciousness, you know. So I like a lot of different things. So if you want to discuss any of those topics, you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram. If you want to visit, we do have like a physical space here in São Paulo. So if you want to just come by and we can always connect.
Awesome. Guys, thank you for joining me here, for going on this adventure with me, for letting me go on this adventure with you. I'm hoping to convince you guys to get that Teddy tattoo with me, but I think I'm going to have a little bit of work ahead of me. But this was an awesome experience, and I really appreciate both of you. I'm really happy that the three of us are still friends. It's not always the case with co-founders.
No, same here. I think we should do this talk 1 year from now to reflect after some time how this experience has been for us in our minds. So really great. Thanks for the conversation, guys. And we're close to each other, so we'll be seeing each other quite often. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so just to wrap up on my side, I want to thank Isaac for the invitation, Daniel, and also Isaac for the journey and very good experiences. All the people that, again, supported us. I do want to thank again the team that went until the end together. That's something that I will always remember. So thank you all for that.
Yeah. Thanks to our team at Teddy. Thanks to our advisors, our investors, everybody that believed in us, everybody that supported us. And I hope you enjoyed this and listen again. Thanks again for joining us. This podcast was hosted by me, Isaac Matzner. It was produced and edited by Maria Filmes. You can find more episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, as well as on our Substack page. We do love feedback, so please feel free to reach out to us on social media or via email at Brazil4beginners@gmail.com.